I don't remember a lot about school in Germany, but I do remember a few things. Um, I remember, for instance, that I decided to play hooky one day. I went to where the bus would pick me up to take me to school and just decided I didn't want to go to school that day and turned around and walked away and played by myself for a while. But I got bored pretty quickly because there was nobody else just playing hooky, and I couldn't go home because my mom would get upset. So I didn't do it again, but it was kind of interesting. I also decided that uh, that playing bartender at school was was fun. I don't know why, but I would during playtime I'd set up a bar and want get the kids martinis or beers or whatever, and the teacher sent a note home to my mom explaining that that probably wasn't the best thing for me to do, so I had to stop that. But I did have some fun with show and tell. I can remember. See, my dad was a big hunter in those days, and he used to go deer hunting. Yeah, and I could remember walking down the stairs at our big hotel, our apartment complex there, and I could smell the fact that there was a fresh kill in the basement because Dad would take his deer down there and hang them for a while before he cut and wrapped them. But I could smell it, so I went down into the basement, and sure enough, Dad had a deer hung up there, and he wasn't quite finished with it, but uh, I thought it was pretty cool, and I picked up one of the feet that he'd cut off and stuck it in my pocket and took it to school for show and tell. Well, having a bloody deer foot in your pocket all day is probably not a good idea. And my mother reminded me of that when I got home and took it back out. And also, the teacher let my mother know that bringing in dead animal parts for show and tell was probably not the best thing to do. So, one other story that was of interest was my mother had this great charm bracelet, and the uh, the charm bracelet had lots and lots of little tiny charms on it. And one of the neat charms that she had was a tiny little pistol on this charm bracelet. I mean, this pistol was, it was maybe an inch and a half. It was really small, but it fired a blank. You could break the pistol open and stick this specially made shell into it and close it, and you could squeeze the trigger and it would to make this tremendous bang like a firecracker. So it was a fun party trick, and she would occasionally shoot this thing off, and everybody thought that was fun. So one of the parties, I asked my mom if I could shoot it, and she said sure. So she carefully gives me the gun and loads it and everything and hands it to me, and uh, and I fired it off. Well, the gun was so small that I had my fingers were getting in the way, and my index finger was over the end of the barrel. I wasn't, paying attention, and so I burned because there wasn't any bullet coming out. But I just literally burned the snot out of my fingers. It would hurt like crazy. So my mom wasn't sure what to do. I mean, it was just a burn, but she panics. And my mom gets on the phone to the hospital, Bissell Base Hospital, and she's trying to explain that her son shot himself in the finger, but that the gun was really small, and she would try to tell them using her fingers how small it was. It was really small. It was only this big, like a little. And of course, they don't care how small the gun is. They think it's a regular gun, and that he shot himself. And the size of the gun's irrelevant if he shot himself with it. Well, then they were going to call the police to come by, and the thing got blown up out of all kinds of proportions. Anyway, finally, I think maybe my dad got on the phone and explained to him that the gun was a charm bracelet and that it fired this little, very, very small little blank, and that the only thing that happened was I had some powder burns and burns on my fingers, but the police didn't have to come, so that was good.
So one of the nice things about living in Germany was that we got to travel a lot throughout Europe, and my folks tried to take advantage of that. And in fact, the whole family traveled around quite a bit. And I can remember we were in Venice, Italy, when my dad got notified that the Korean War had started, and being that he was, an Army or actually Air Force major at the time, he got recalled back to the base, and we had to cut our vacation short. So that was one time where it wasn't good. I can remember another time my folks were going to go skiing, and I had this infection, it wasn't much of one. It was a little zit on my leg that was kind of infected. So my mom was putting hot compresses on it, and that was helping a little bit. And she told our maid to continue to do that, and and they took off for vacation. Well, the maid was pretty worthless, and I was able to tell her no. Hell, I'm in second grade. What do I know about no? But anyway, so she doesn't put the compress on. I'm not sure that would have made a lot of difference, but I was going to go camping with some buddies, and so sure enough, the dad came by, and he saw me limping around, and when he was going to pick me up, and he wanted to know why I was limping, and I showed him, and he immediately took me to the hospital. I mean, right there. Had me pick my pants on, took me right to the hospital, because he could see the red running through up my legs and stuff, and he knew I had blood poisoning. So sure enough, they stuck me in the hospital and jammed me full of antibiotics for a long time, till finally I got healthy enough that I could go back, and I actually missed a week of school. That was quite a surprise to my folks when they came home for vacation and found out that I was in the hospital. Everything was fine. And after that 3-year tour, we got reassigned to Illinois. So we actually flew home, and in those days, you couldn't fly across the Atlantic very well. So we had to stop at Gander, Newfoundland, which was pretty common. And when we landed, they ended up quarantining the plane, because I'm not sure everybody who was sick, but I do remember just before we were getting ready to land, that this girl who was sitting in the seat next to me threw up, which, that happens on planes. But then she had a whole bunch of sisters and brothers and stuff all sitting down the same aisle, and they all threw up in, kind of in sequential order, one after the other, until we got a whole, double row full of kids that were sick. And then it turns out one of the babies had some sort of, mumps or chicken pox or some infectious disease. And so they made us all deplane there, Gander, and hang out for a few hours until we finally got cleared to go back in. And we flew into what was called Idlewild Airport in those days. It's now JFK. And some friends of ours that we knew in Germany, the Overmost, picked us up, and we were going to stay at their house for a little bit. And I remember two things after landing. One of them was that on the way to the house, it was a nice, sunny, warm summer day, and we were in a convertible going along in the road, and Elvis Presley comes on with Hang Dog Man, Hang Dog Man. And that was one of his songs, and it was the first rock and roll song I'd ever heard. So that was kind of cool. I remember that. And then we got to the Obermos, and Mom got a call from her mother and found out that her grandfather had died. Now, I knew my great-grandfather. He was a great guy. We used to go fishing and go to the zoo together and all kinds of stuff when I visited. And so I was pretty bummed that was sad for me too. I mean, it was obviously worse for my mother, but I remember that as well. Well, so much for the first Germany trip.
So one other deer story that's kind of interesting. My dad loved to hunt, as I mentioned, and he was always struggling to find a place to hang his deer after he would kill them. And for a while, we had a nice cabin out in the woods, and he would hunt out of the cabin, and that was kind of fun. But when we were at the apartments there in downtown Wiesbaden, he was struggling, and so I can remember that my mom came home one time after Dad had been hunting, and she walked into the bathroom, and there was blood and guts everywhere. I mean, it was just disgusting. My father had decided to gut and cut the deer in the bathtub, and had not had a chance to clean up yet. So I guess it was a pretty disgusting sight, and my mom was pretty angry, as you can imagine. Well, she went from there, angry as a hornet, into the kitchen and saw that somebody was cooking something on the stove. She thought, oh, okay. So she went over the stove and lifted the top off the pot, and immediately screamed and dropped the pot, because looking up at her from the inside was this deer head that my father was trying to boil the meat off of. As you can imagine, neither condition repeated itself ever again. Anyway, I thought that was kind of an interesting story.